So in the beginning of Parshas, this week's Torah portion, we read about the donations that were brought for the building of the Mishkan, and Hashem gives the Jewish people a list of materials that need to be brought in order to build a Mishkan. And if we look at the list, it seems to be a very, very organized list. The Torah starts off, I want you to bring gold, silver, copper, blue wool, purple and red wool, linen, goat skins, ram skins, and tachash skins, and wood, oil, spices, and so far the list seems to be going, starting at the most important and valuable items. We start off with gold, go to silver, to copper, and slowly we make our way down the list to the less important items. But then, all the way at the end of the list, the Torah tells us, you should bring the precious gems and diamonds and precious stones that should be put into the choshen and the ephod of the high priest. And everybody asks, the list seems to be going in a very organized manner. We start off with the most valuable donations, the most valuable gifts, the most precious gifts, and we're going lower and lower, until all the way in the end, suddenly it lists the most important item on the list, the most precious item on the list. And there are many different explanations given. We're going to focus on one of the answers that's given by the Orach Chaim. So Rabbi Gavriel was a wealthy merchant in the city of Vitebsk. And he was a chassid of Reb Shneir Zalman, of the Alter Rebbe. And he was very, very wealthy, and he gave generously to many different causes. And whenever the Alter Rebbe needed to raise funds for different things that, whether it was helping people, helping the Jews in Eretz Yisrael, helping Jewish prisoners, Pidyon Shvuyim, or supporting Talmidei Chachamim, he would send out messengers to all of his wealthy Hasidim, and they would collect money from them. And there was a certain amount that each one was expected to give to each one of these causes. And Rabbi Gavriel always made sure to give a very generous donation whenever he was asked. And he and his wife, Gavriel and his wife, Chana, had been married for 25 years, but unfortunately they never merited to have children. Now, one day, Gavriel's business suddenly starts going downhill, right? It happens. There was a big crash. The market crashed, and things just started going down, and one business shut down after the other, and Gavriel lost all of his money. Now, it's from Hashem. He knows money comes from Hashem. There's nothing to be upset about. And he accepted it happily. It's Hashem's decree. Until a messenger arrived in town from the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is collecting money, and he sent a messenger to Rabbi Gavriel. And Rabbi Gavriel doesn't have anything to give him. And he comes home, and he starts crying. And his wife, Chana, sees him crying. And she says, "What's wrong?" And he says, the messenger from the Alter Rebbe is collecting funds. There are some Jews who were thrown into prison, and they're raising funds for Pidyon Shvuyim, for redeeming captives, and I don't have anything to give. And Chana is very touched by this. She sees how much this bothers her husband. So she goes to her jewelry box, and she takes out some of her jewelry from better times, and she immediately goes out and she sells them. And she's able to put together the amount of money that her husband usually gave for these causes. She gets all the coins ready, and she brings it to her husband. Her husband's so excited. Tomorrow morning he's going to go to the Rebbe, and he's going to bring him the tzedakah. That night, Chana takes these coins that she gave away, the last jewelry that she had, the most precious things to her. And she decides if she's giving a donation to the Rebbe, she has to make sure it's a beautiful donation. So she sits down and she starts polishing the coins, right? The copper coins that are there, and she starts polishing them. And she polished them, she scrubbed them and polished them until they were shining with a brilliant light. The next morning, Gabriel takes the bag of coins And he goes to the Rebbe, he brings the Rebbe the coins, the Rebbe opens the bag, pours the coins out on the table, and the whole room lights up. And the Rebbe stops. He looks at the coins, and he says to Gabriel, when the Jews brought donations for the Mishkan, they brought all different materials. They brought gold, they brought silver, they brought copper, and the gold was beautiful gold, top quality. But we don't find anywhere that the gold shone brightly. There's only one thing that we find that was shiny in the Beis HaMikdash, and that was the copper that was used for the kiyar, for the wash basin of the Kohanim. Why was it so shiny? So we find at the end of this week's Torah portion, Rashi brings it down, that the copper that was used for the kiyar was donated by the Jewish women. They donated their mirrors. In those days, mirrors weren't made out of glass, like glass they are today. They were made out of copper, very very finely polished copper, and the Jewish women wanted to have a special part in the building of the Mishkan, so they donated their shiny mirrors to the building of the Mishkan, and it was used for the kiyar, which was placed at the entrance. When the Kohanim first came in, they wanted to wash their hands, they had this shiny kiyar. And Rashi tells us in this week's Torah portion that even though it was only copper, it wasn't gold or silver, but this was the most valued and treasured donation in the Mishkan. Hashem loved it more than any of the other donations. And Alter Rebbe turns to Gabriel, and he says, I want these coins, they're copper coins, but they're shining like the mirrors donated to the Mishkan. Tell me, how did you get these coins? And Gabriel tells Alter Rebbe, he tells him the whole story, how he lost all of his money, and he was so upset that he couldn't give a donation, and his wife sold her jewelry, and she sat there polishing the coins all night. And the Rebbe closed his eyes, and then he proceeded to give Gabriel and his wife a blessing. He blessed him, first of all, that he should be once again be successful in his business. He told him actually he told him to close his business in Vitebsk and to go into the diamond business, the business of diamonds and precious stones. And he blessed him that he should become very wealthy, and he should be able to give more and more tzedakah. And he also blessed him that him and his wife, Hannah, should be blessed with children. After 25 years of marriage, they should be blessed with children, and they should live to an old age. And he also blessed him that Hashem should give him chen, Hashem should give him grace in people's eyes. And Baruch Hashem, Gabriel became very successful in the diamond business. Him and his wife had many children, and he was known as Rabbi Gabriel Noisei Chen, Rabbi Gabriel the graceful one. And he lived to the age of 110, and his wife lived 2 years after him, outlived him by 2 years. So when Hashem measures the donations that were brought to the Mishkan, we might think that the gold was the most valuable, precious donation. It was much more expensive than copper, and that's true in general. But there was a specific donation that was even more precious than the gold, right? That was the mirrors that were donated by the Jewish women, because this meant something to them. They took something that was important to themselves, something that meant something that was their most prized possession, and they gave it away to Hashem. The Tosefta tells us that when the second Beis HaMikdash was built, when the Jews first came up from the Babylonian exile, they were very poor. The Jews in Eretz Yisrael were very poor. Most of the wealthy Jews refused to come out of exile. They decided to stay in Bavel, in Persia, right? They don't want to leave their businesses behind. It's not like today where you could hop on a flight and travel to Israel and come back every week to run your business. In those days, you had to, anyone who wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, to the Beis HaMikdash, had to basically leave his old life behind. So all of the rich Jews in Bavel refused to come up. And the Jews that went up were basically all the poor people. That's what happened. All the poor Jews went up to Eretz Yisrael to build a Beis HaMikdash, and they barely had any money to build a Beis HaMikdash. Right? There were donations that were given by the king, by Daryavish, to help them, but it was very difficult. And when the second Beis HaMikdash was built, it was built with very simple materials, with a lot of copper and wood. But slowly over time, as more and more wealthy Jews came into Eretz Yisrael, and the Jews in Eretz Yisrael were successful, they started changing things in the Beis Hamikdash slowly to use more and more gold. And the Tosefta tells us that all of the doors in the Beis Hamikdash, even though they're originally made out of wood, but over time they started to cover the doors. Either they made the doors out of gold, or at least they covered the doors with gold. Except for one door. There was one door, the biggest door in the Beis Hamikdash, that was not covered in gold. That was called the Gate of Nicanor. The Gate of Nicanor. That was made out of copper, and it always remained out of copper. Why? So the Tosefta tells us the story. Nicanor was a wealthy merchant in Egypt, in Alexandria, and when he traveled to the Beis Hamikdash, to the second Beis Hamikdash, and he saw the state of the Beis Hamikdash, how everything was so simple, he decided he has to make it nice. So he went back to Egypt, and he decided he's going to make beautiful brass copper doors. And he went to the finest craftsmen in Egypt, and he had them make the most beautiful doors for the Beis Hamikdash. And then he after spending all of his money to make these doors, he took them on a boat to travel to Eretz Yisrael. And as they're traveling by boat, a storm breaks out, and the boat starts to shake back and forth. And the sailors try to stabilize the boat, but they don't have a lot of success. And they say, we have to remove some of the weight from the ship. It's going to sink. So they tell everybody to start throwing their baggage overboard, right? And Nicanor is not... What?
Pollution.
I guess when your life is in danger, these calculations aren't very... The environment takes a lower, it's not as important, right? So they begin throwing bags overboard, and there's two big, heavy copper doors. They were 5 cubits by 20 cubits each one, right? So the sailors grab one of the doors and they start throwing it overboard. Nicanor is very upset. He tells them, "You got to stop," and they say no. They insist. They take the door and they throw it overboard. And the ship's a little bit lighter. It kind of stabilizes a little bit, but then the storm proceeds to get even stronger. And they see they're in danger of sinking again. They tell Nicanor, "We got to throw over the second door." And Nicanor's like, "Absolutely not." And they say, "We're not asking you. We're taking the door, throwing it over." Nicanor jumps on top of the door. He grabs hold of it. He says, "You throw the door over, you got to throw me as well." Okay, they pause for a second, and at that moment the storm stops. The storm stops. And Nicanor, on one hand, is very happy. The second door wasn't thrown overboard, but he said, "I should have done it earlier, right? I should have done it for the first door."
I said no,
right?
Brooks, do more.
So they proceed to they continue their journey to Eretz Yisrael, and as they come to Eretz Yisrael, as they come to the port in Yaffo, there are two different versions of the story. Either they see the door floating on the water, even though it's made out of copper, it's floating along next to the boat. Another opinion is that it was swallowed up by some sort of sea creature who proceeded to spit it out. Since they accepted two different versions.
It's funny though that, like, in a way, it makes more sense that it was swallowed.
Yeah.
Because if it was busy the whole time following them, they never saw
Notice
the whole
it.
time.
Yeah.
I never thought about it, but now we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a pretty serious sea creature to swallow up 5 cubit by 20 cubit door, but
Hashem could figure it out.
so and they put these doors up at the main entrance to the Azara between Eretz Nashim and Eretz Yisrael, and later on, even though later on they became more wealthy and they started making covering the doors with gold, these doors they always left as they were. And the Gemara gives two reasons. One reason is that they wanted everybody to remember the miracle that happened with these doors. But the other reason is that these doors shone like gold. That's what's written about these doors. They're made out of copper, but they shone like gold because of the tremendous sacrifice that Nicanor made for these doors. The next story is a story that I've said before, but it's one of my favorite stories. My kids are probably sick of hearing it. They heard it many, many times. But it's one of my favorite stories. It's about my great grandfather. And it's a very opportune time to say it. In addition to the fact that it has to do with the lesson that we're discussing now, we're also right now on today Chav Daled Adar was 3 days after the yard site of Rabbi Elimelech of Luzensk. So the story there are many different versions of this story. I'm going to say it as it's written in by the Frierdiker Rebbe in Sefer HaMaimarim Tavshin Yud Aleph on page 310. This is a story about a Jew, as I said, my great-grandfather, Rabbi Eliezer Lipa. He was a water carrier in the city of Tarnov, Ukraine. And, he was a simple man. He didn't know how to learn very much, but he made sure to daven every day with a minyan, and he tried to make sure to answer everything during the davening. He honored Talmidei Chachamim, and he would try to go whenever he had a chance to go to Torah classes. But most of the day he spent working. He was a hard worker. He would go around bringing water to all the people in the city. And Baruch Hashem, he was successful in his water carrying business. I don't know how successful a water carrier could be, but as a water carrier, he was successful. How was he so successful? Because amongst his customers were the 4 richest people in the city. They used to pay double the price for the water that they bought. They used to pay twice the market rates. So he had the 4 wealthiest people in the city. They were his customers, and Baruch Hashem, he was doing well, and him and his wife were very happy. But there was one thing that bothered them. Their children, they had, I think at that time, 2 sons. Later they would have more, but their children they sent their children to school, but they were not successful in school. They were not able to learn Torah. And, Eliezer Lipa and his wife were very bothered by this. Every day they would daven to Hashem. Unfortunately, we did not have an opportunity to become Torah scholars, but at least our children, we wanted to do everything we could that our children should study Torah. And they used to pray to Hashem every day to help their children learn Torah. One day, Eliezer Lipa is walking through the marketplace with buckets of water on his shoulders. Maybe, I don't know if he had a wagon to carry the water. I don't know exactly how they did it and exactly how he transported the water. He's going through the marketplace, and he sees a commotion in the middle of the market. And as he comes closer, he sees this rabbi standing in the middle of the marketplace, and he's talking. And a whole group of people had gathered around this rabbi, this unknown rabbi, and he was telling them stories. Everybody came to hear the stories, right?
Sounds familiar.
And of course, this rabbi was unknown at the time, but later this rabbi would be revealed as Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. At that time, he was still a hidden tzaddik, and he would wander around from city to city, telling over stories and teaching the simple Jews how to serve Hashem. And of course, Eliezer Lipa hears this rabbi talking. He wants to also get in. He wants to hear the stories. So he comes closer, and the Baal Shem Tov is telling over the following story. He says, many, many years ago, in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, there lived a very, very wealthy Jew. His Jew's name, for this story, we'll call him Baruch. Okay? Baruch was extremely wealthy. He gave a lot of tzedakah. He was very generous. And of course, since he lived in Yerushalayim, he liked to bring gifts to Hashem. He would bring sacrifices to Hashem. One day, he decided that he wants to bring a special sacrifice to Hashem. A special gift. A special korban. So he decided he's going to bring the biggest, fattest, the most beautiful ox that has ever been brought to the Beis Hamikdash. So he sends the servants to the market. He tells them, I want you to look around and find me the fattest, biggest ox that you could find. They come back, they bring him some different oxen, and he's looking, he's like, nah, that's not good enough. He sends the servants around to the nearby cities all over the land of Israel to try to look for a good, big, fat, juicy ox to bring as a korban for Hashem. And they spent the next few months searching and searching until finally they found this beast, this massive beast. Somehow they managed to transport it to Yerushalayim. I'm not sure how. And he's so excited he's going to bring a special korban. No one has ever bought such a big ox, such a big gift, such a big korban to Hashem. And of course, he didn't just want to celebrate on his own. He wanted the whole city to celebrate with him. So together with the ox, he also brought a bunch of lambs. He's going to bring those. The ox is going to be, brought as a gift to Hashem, as a carbon oila, to be burnt on the mizbeach. But he would also bring a bunch of lambs as a carbon shlamim, sacrifices that he would be able to eat with his friends and his family. He invited all the people in Yerushalayim to join him. He also brought a bunch of carbon minchas, a bunch of bread and flour offerings to the Beis Hamikdash. And he announced there was going to be a big party that night. Right? They were going to make a big party to celebrate his special gift for Hashem. Right? We should all feel like that. When we give a gift to Hashem, it's not something private. We tell everybody we're making a big party. We have a chance to give a gift to Hashem. L'chaim, l'chaim. And Baruch gets up early in the morning. Everything is ready. Him and all of his servants, they take the ox and they start walking towards the Beis Hamikdash. At first, I think they try to get the ox onto some sort of wagon, but there was no wagon that was able to fit that ox. And so they start walking, and they're walking to the Beis Hamikdash. Of course, the ox is walking in the front. They have a bunch of lambs in the back, and people are carrying 4 sacks of flour and oil. They're going to bring all their sacrifices. And they get to the edge of Yerushalayim, and they are at the foot of the mountain, of Mount Moriah. And Baruch's so excited. He looks up to the top of the mountain, and he sees the Beis Hamikdash. And guess who else looks up? The ox. Ox looks up, sees this big mountain, and he's like, moo! Right? This is not for me. And he's walked enough already, got enough exercise for that day, and he decides to sit down on the ground. Right? So Baruch pulls a little rope around the ox's neck. He starts pulling, but he's not moving that ox. He calls a few of his servants in. They all start pulling, and they're still not moving the ox. So people see a commotion over there, so people start gathering around, and a bunch of people stand in the back. They start trying to push the ox. This ox isn't moving, and they're 50 people are surrounding this ox. They're trying to push it, and finally the ox starts getting angry. He swings his head, and 10 people go flying, and they don't know what to do. The ox just doesn't want to move. What? I'm not sure. I wasn't there. So, and people are gathering around. They're trying to figure out. They're yelling at the ox. They're afraid to hit the ox. They don't want to mess with this ox. And as there's this big commotion is going on, Chaim is passing by. Chaim was a poor man who worked all day in the fields, and he earned a few coins. And he had gone, after he earned a few coins, he had gone to the market, and he brought a little bundle of greens, of celery, for his family to eat, right? And he was on the way home, and he sees this big commotion at the edge of the city, at the bottom of the Temple Mount. So he goes over to see what happened. And he's told that there's this big ox that doesn't want to move. They're trying to bring it up to the Beis Hamikdash. They're kainim who are coming down from the mountain. They have experience with the ox, and they're trying to move it, but it's not moving. So Chaim walks over. He opens up his little bundle of celery. He takes the celery stalk. He walks over to the ox. He puts it in front of the ox's mouth. Now this ox is a little interested in, so he starts nibbling on the celery. And Chaim starts lifting up the celery, and the ox starts picking up its head. Finally, he can't reach it anymore, so he stands up, right? And finishes the stalk of celery. Chaim takes out another stalk. And the ox is nibbling, and Chaim starts walking backwards, and the ox starts walking forwards, following Chaim. And slowly Chaim is going up the mountain, and the ox is eating more and more. And finally, by the time all the celery was gone, they were on the top of the mountain, and the Kohanim were able to grab the ox and bring it as a korban in the Beis Hamikdash. Baruch was so excited. Everyone, the whole city was talking about the special gift, the special sacrifice that was brought to Hashem. And they made a big party, of course. They brought all the sheep, the lambs, and the bread, and the flour, and the oil, and they made a huge party. The whole Yerushalayim was celebrating. They were drinking the whole night. They were really celebrating. They had a full night celebration. Finally, in the early morning hours, Baruch finally dozed off. Right? Finally dozed off, and he's so happy. And he has a dream. And in his dream, he's given a message from heaven. He's told that it's something very special today. Brought a special gift to Hashem. And Hashem is very happy with your gift. But I want you to know that as beautiful as your gift was, it wasn't the nicest korban. It wasn't the greatest sacrifice that was brought today. The bundle of celery that Chaim gave was more precious and valuable in the eyes of Hashem. And the Baal Shem Tov finished the story, and he turns to all the people in the marketplace in Karnav, and And he tells them, we think that in order to bring a gift for Hashem, we have to give a lot of money, we have to give gold, we have to give something precious. But that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants every person to take something that's precious to you, that's valuable to you, that's important to you, and give that away to Hashem. And that's the most precious thing, right? The copper mirrors were more beautiful than the gold, right? The brass gates were more precious than the golden doors that were made afterwards. And the celery was more important than the big ox in Hashem's eyes. So every one of you, so Hashem tells all these people in these simple Jews in the marketplace, every one of you can bring a gift to Hashem. Can bring the greatest gift to Hashem. Find something that's important to you and give it away to Hashem. Eliezer Lipa is very inspired by this. He comes home and he tells his wife, "We got to bring a carbon to Hashem." His wife says, "A carbon to Hashem? There's no Beis Hamikdash today." He says, "No, we don't need a Beis Hamikdash. There's a rabbi in the marketplace. He told me this whole story. He tells her the whole story. We can bring a carbon to Hashem. We have to find things that's important to us and give it up for Hashem. What's important to us? I'm a water carrier. What do I have?" And he starts thinking. He's thinking, and he spends the next few days. Him and his wife are discussing what type of gift could they bring to Hashem. Finally, he comes up with an idea. He says, I bring water to all the rich people of the city. And I'm not the only water carrier in town. There's another water carrier. His name is Zalman Doiv. And he's not as successful as me. He brings water to the 4 shuls in town. Right? Now, the 4 shuls in Tarnov, they got the big discount, the 50% discount on their water. Right? And Eliezer Lipa says, wouldn't it be great if I could bring the water to the 4 shuls of the city? That could be my gift to Hashem. And his wife is like, you're pretty busy as it is. You spend all your day bringing water. You're not going to have time to. The shuls use a lot of water. Everybody comes in, they wash their hands. Before they start davening, in the middle of davening, they like to go out to wash their hands. Right? The shuls use a lot of water. It's going to be a lot of work. And he says, You're right. You have to figure out what to do. And not only that, I don't know if Zalman Doy is going to be willing to give up his customers. Right? They get a discount, but they're still customers. They're still paying customers. So he thinks, he says, you know what? I'm going to give up my 4 best customers, the 4 wealthiest people in Tarna, and I'm going to exchange them with Zalman Doiv for the 4 shuls. I know I'm going to lose a lot of money, but this is my gift to Hashem. That's what the rabbi said. That's what the Baal Shem Tov said. So he went the next morning. He spoke to Zalman Doiv, who was pretty happy with the deal, right? And from then on, he would get up very early in the morning. His wife would sometimes come and help him fill up the water, and he would bring the water to the 4 shuls in Tarna. And from within a few days, he started hearing reports about his 2 sons who were in yeshiva, that something happened. Things turned around. They were now from the best students in the yeshiva. And his 2 oldest sons grew up to be the famous tzaddikim, Rabbi Elimelech of Lezensk and Rabbi Zusha of Anepali, as we said at Rabbi Melech's yard site, it was 3 days ago. So this, says the Orach Chaim, it explains the order of the donations for the Mishkan. We take a look at the donations, and they're listed in the order. What? So there is, further on, he found a diamond when he was collecting the water, but he didn't want the diamond. He gave it away to tzedakah. He hid it, and then he gave it away to tzedakah. It's a long story. It's in Sefer Maimorim Tavshin Yud Aleph. But this was the part of the story that we wanted to focus on now. So this, the Orach Chaim explains the order. This is how the Orach Chaim explains the order of the donations. Right? When the Torah lists the order of the donations, it starts off with gold, because gold is the most precious item. Now, it's not that Hashem likes gold or Hashem needs gold, but the people who are giving the donation, people who give gold, are giving their most valuable possessions. Right? Now, of course, they're all very wealthy. They came out of Egypt. They're very wealthy. But still, to give away your own possessions to Hashem is a great thing. Gold, silver, copper, it goes from the most expensive to the least expensive. However, there was one donation which was on a lower level than all the other ones. And those were the diamonds. Why? The Medrash tells us that the diamonds, the Jewish people didn't have those precious stones in the desert. And they had no way of acquiring it at that time. But one day, the leaders of the Jewish people...
Some from Egypt?
So they got, but they didn't have those exact stones that were needed, or at least not in the sizes that were needed, or the quality that was needed. And the leaders of the Jewish people, the Nesiim, went out one morning to collect their mun that had just fallen down from the heaven. And they're looking at their mun and they see diamonds just laying there amongst the mun. They picked it up and he said, wow, these are the diamonds, the exact diamonds that we need for the Beis HaMikdash. They brought it right away to the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Or Chaim, those diamonds, nobody took something that belonged to them. Nobody took something that was valuable to them and gave it away to Hashem. They fell down from the heavens. That's worthless in the eyes of Hashem. I mean, it's nice and it's beautiful, but the oil and spices and wood that somebody took from their own possessions and gave it away to Hashem is 100 times more valuable than those diamonds. Right? The bundle of celery, if that's what's important to you, that's what's valuable to you, and you gave it away to Hashem, is 100 times more precious in Hashem's eyes than the biggest, fattest ox. And that's why the diamonds are listed at the end. Because nobody actually gave away from their own possessions to Hashem. And this is something that we all have to realize. In our own lives, we all want to give a gift to Hashem. Right? And we don't have a Beis HaMikdash today. So what do? Says the Baal Shem Tov, every one of us has to look at our own lives and think about what's important to us that we can give away to Hashem. What's valuable to us that we can sacrifice and give away to Hashem. We have to realize that even though it's just a bundle of celery, in Hashem's eyes, it's the most important and generous and beautiful and valuable donation. And just to conclude the final story, there was a yeshiva bacher who, he wanted to learn, and he spent a lot of time learning, but he didn't have such a good head, and he was not successful in his learning. And he felt a little bad because all of his fellow students in the yeshiva are learning one page of the Talmud after another, and they're moving forward, and he's stuck on, still in the first page trying to understand, the Tosfos. For a few weeks he spent on a single Tosfos, and all of his friends are going ahead, and they're learning, one page after another, and he's still stuck on the first page, the second page, and after a full year, he only managed to learn 4 pages of Gemara, right? And in some yeshivas that would be considered good, actually, but at least in the yeshiva that this bacher was in, that was considered a pretty small amount. So at the end of the year, he was traveling and he passed by the city of Radin and he went to visit the Chafetz Chaim. And when he came to the Chafetz Chaim asked him, how is your learning going? And he said, unfortunately I've been learning all year and I only learned 4 pages of Gemara. Chaim's face lit up, and he said, wow, 400 pages? That's amazing! He said, no, 4 pages. And he says, amazing, 400? Wow, 400 pages! Okay. And, this Chaim must be getting old. He leans over, right? He leans over, and he's like, Rebbe, I didn't say 400, I said 4. And Chafetz Chaim said, I heard that you said 4. But the Aviz Rab Nosson says, Yofe pam achas b'tzar, mimeya pamim shaloi b'tzar. A person who learns or who does a mitzvah one time out of pain and hardship is worth more than 100 mitzvahs which are done without pain and without hardship. And this is something that we all need to realize, right? Our 4 pages that we do are more precious to Hashem than 400 pages. So l'chaim, we should all find our own bundle of celery, and we should give that bundle of celery away to Hashem. L'chaim.